More controversy surrounding the president's signature health care law. As we told you at the top of the hour, some Republicans in Congress say the president's use of executive power to make changes to Obamacare violates the Constitution. Utah Senator Mike Lee accuses the president of essentially rewriting the law and called his actions, quote, a shameless act. But Senator Lee admits there isn't much Congress can do to stop President Obama. Let's bring in the Fox News political insiders, John LeBoutillier, former Republican congressman for New York, Pat Caddell, a former pollster for President Jimmy Carter and Fox News contributor. And joining us via satellite, we miss him, but he's still with us, Doug Schoen, former pollster for President Clinton and Fox News contributor as well. Joining us from L.A. Bring us some sunshine, won't you? And you can join the conversation, as some of you already are, because the Twitter feed is flying, at FInsiders, at Harris Faulkner, hashtag FRW, or Facebook.com/Harris Faulkner. I'll pull from both of those. Doug, I'm going to start with you. 29 delays, 35 changes at least since Obamacare became law. Clearly, there are problems with it. Is the president bending the Constitution with all those moves?
Well, I think he may well be, but I call this, Harris, simply abuse of power. Bottom line, the president is making laws and changing laws on his own say-so. We heard Mike Lee, but bottom line, there's been no chorus from the Republican Party about this. There's no sense of outrage. I'm angry. I think most Americans are, because the law isn't what they were promised. They can't keep their policies. They can't keep their doctors. As we just heard, premiums are going up. Bottom line, the president is delaying it for political purposes, not to make it better.
Pat, is this how it's supposed to work?
Of course not. We're supposed to be a nation of laws, not men. And we are now in what I call a semi-banana republic, where the president or whoever it is, George Bush, W. Bush, the same thing. You just make up the law, decide which laws you don't have to like, you don't have to implement or change them. But nothing like we've ever seen on Obamacare. And let me just say this in response to Senator Lee. It is because of the attitude of people like him that they can do nothing. The Republicans could shut the country down over the question of the president not following the law, as opposed to what they shut it down before. They should demand he do it. They have the right of standing. But you know what? Because a lot of them are in favor of that kind of behavior. The political class always is.
We have polling in the new Fox News poll this week that shows that 70% of the country believes Obama is ruling improperly by doing all these changes on his own, executive orders, recess appointments, including 54% of Democrats who say he shouldn't be doing it.
But the media is silent, and the political class, including some of the people on this network, I want to say, who don't want to do this because they're in favor of these kinds of things, because first they feather their nests at the expense of the people. This is the worst disaster ever handed to you.
You were spreading this around like peanut butter. You say this is just how Washington is?
Well, it is. When Bush was George W. Bush was president, right? When a law was passed that he didn't like, he did a thing called a signing statement, which said, I'm only going to enforce part of the law. But that's not right either.
But you're saying that we haven't seen it, so obviously we haven't seen it this egregious.
Well, because life is a slippery slope. When one starts, it gets worse, and as they find out they can do more, you continue down that road. I'm sure Doug agrees with that.
You know, I want to put some, you mentioned some Fox News polling, but I want to put, Doug, before we go to you, some numbers up on the screen, because this is how people feel about Obamacare at this point. They wish that it had never been passed. You want to know the percentage there? 55%. So if the president is looking at this kind of polling, he may be brandishing his pen because he knows he's got to change it. Doug?
Harris, that's exactly right. And he is doing what he's doing, delaying the employer mandate for small and medium-sized employers for political purposes to get through the next election. He is not doing it because of any right to do it or any legislative approval. Pat and John are right. This is a government that is out of control, where the citizens are basically dealing with a rigged deck of Republicans and Democrats who do what they want and don't serve the people's interests, serve their political interests.
Pat, hold on, because I know you'll say something good too. But let me just say, the Republicans' fault in here is that they will not stand up on anything. We're going to go through other things with you in a minute.
I just want to say on health care, that 55%, more than almost two-thirds of the American people, including a majority of Democrats, believe that if what had been known about this law had been known at the time, it never would have passed. And they're right.
But we were told that you have to pass it to find out what's in it. I mean, that wasn't an accident. That's true. We didn't make that up. That happened.
We got to look at the big picture here. The United States of America has a law, Obamacare, running, as we've heard, 1/6 of the economy.
Right.
Where more than half the people don't believe in the law and don't like it. Now, how
they
can
wish it
that
hadn't
work?
been passed.
Well, more than that, as Pat just said. But how can it work?
Let me just say, the reason the president won't fix it, and the reason the Republicans won't, is because it's all about politics and what they think they can get out. The Democratic Party will defend to the death, no matter how disastrous this is, even if it kills them, because they cannot admit they've made a mistake.
And here's what's going to happen.
The Republicans won't offer any alternative.
Republicans won't offer an alternative. They may very well luck into winning the Senate and keeping the House this year. And this snake is going to get thrown on them. And they don't have a clue what to do about it.
You're talking about luck into winning the Senate, but there's definitely, Doug, a strategy that Republicans are working on now. We're starting to kind of see that. We saw it with him kind of not really putting up as much of a fight as much of the country thought that they would over raising the debt limit. What happened there?
Well, bottom line, they made a decision that they didn't need to fight, that they see the polls going their direction. Because John Boehner could not command a majority of his own caucus to fight. They lost disastrously on the government shutdown over the budget last September and October. And bottom line, they made a tactical decision to retreat, to not even stand up for pensions for our military. Bottom line, it was political surrender for political gain. But bottom line, no one is putting the American people first. No one is putting the interests of the American people ahead of short-term political gain.
How about a betrayal?
Harris, it's a tragedy.
Not just a surrender.
It is a betrayal.
All right, I want to bring in some of our Twitter responses. Will Did It says, why can't the citizens of the USA sue the Obama administration for violating the Constitution? Don't we have standing, meaning the citizens? What's the law on that?
Well, first of all, we already have a suit in the Supreme Court over the recess appointments. That's going to be decided whether they were unconstitutional. I'm sure there is something working its way somewhere in the lower federal courts on the 29 changes that he's made. All these things take a while, but they'll get there. Yeah.
If any Democrat, and it breaks my heart, if any Democrats of conscience who put the Constitution first, if any Republicans actually put the country before what they thought were politics, you should have 100 or more people who could file a bill and go to the court and demand standing. And you know what? They might get standing, but at least the entire country would be riveted. All of this is kabuki theater, not to do anything.
By the way, this week
they don't care because they all want to do it themselves.
We did have Rand Paul suing the Obama administration over the NSA thing this week. Not a peep about the Obamacare.
Yeah, nobody will. And by the way, one person. What I'm saying is, where's the 100 and some? Just like the 180 on the.
We have 180 in Benghazi, and they won't touch it.
And
we're going to talk about that broader, wider strategy that I was alluding to, because we saw the Speaker of the House, not just with regard to the debt limit, but also with the IRS investigation and those Tea Party groups that were singled out. Why isn't the GOP pressing for that investigation? I know you all have your thoughts on that. You tweeted about it earlier. And I just want to mention this, because Doug put this out on Twitter. He said that the GOP has surrendered.
I've been sickened that Nixon went down the toilet, in part, for using or talking about using the IRS to go after his enemies. Here, Obama is doing it, the Obama administration. Where are the Republicans from Boehner on down having high-level investigations to get to the bottom?
Where
I have not understood.
There's an answer for that, John. It's an obvious one. When you have 71% who want an investigation, 64% who believe that it is a sign of corruption, including nearly a majority of Democrats. The reason is the establishment Republicans want the IRS to go after the Tea Parties. Got it? They want to go after the Tea Parties because the Tea Parties are a outside threat to their power hold. And I'm telling you, the lobbying consulting class of the Republican Party and Republican leadership who have been attacking the Tea Parties and alienating them, they want the IRS to do this. And worse, the IRS is also now given the assignment this week to be used against businesses who may be cutting their workforce because of Obamacare. They have this lawless operation going on that no one will investigate or stop.
And one other one, before Doug gets in, let me just add, there's one other one that doesn't get enough publicity. Pro-Israel lobbying groups, the IRS went after them because they were in opposition to the Obama foreign policy. Two things,
and I want to get to Doug. Two things. Q Bones on Twitter just tweeted this. Both parties fear the Tea Party would put an end to the massive corruption. Whether or not it would, who knows, which speaks to what you guys are talking about. But I want to put up, if we can, words on the screen now, because you guys were talking about a poll that we took with Fox News. Congress should continue to investigate the IRS on singling out these Tea Party groups and these pro-Israel groups, as you just said, John. 71% of Americans now say they want that to happen. Doug?
Yeah, Harris, what John and Pat are saying is absolutely true. Close to 3/4 of the American people see an abuse of power here. They believe that the IRS is being used for political purposes. They want to stop it and they want to investigate it. But both sides, the Democrats, the Republicans, don't want to do it. And indeed, in the Republican Party, I'm of the opinion that the establishment Republicans are fighting harder against the Tea Party than they are against the Democrats.
Because, Doug,
bottom line.
Go ahead, sir.
It's because this is about intramural politics and self-interest, not the interests of the American people.
Let me add to what Doug said at this point. This is about preserving privileges and arrangements that benefit these people over the country. And
that just makes it seem so seedy.
It is worse than seedy. It is worse than corrupt. It is the issue that no one is allowed to speak of, and the American people in the polls know it. This is a corrupt political system that doesn't function, and it's from rots, and it, like as Michael Dukakis once said, and it rots from the head down.
All right, let's talk about a wider strategy for the GOP. Why not fight? And you guys are laying out a very distasteful, but you seem to agree on this, and I'm seeing this all over Twitter and Facebook too, picture of how Washington works. But the Speaker of the House, John Boehner, is there a wider strategy for winning in 2014?
Yes.
What is it?
And Doug touched on it a minute ago. They have cleared the decks of every controversy that could hurt Republicans. Right? There's going to be no government.
So what do you run on?
Well, they don't want to run on anything. They want the Democrats to go down the toilet over Obamacare.
No principles that they are. Neither party believes in anything for which they're willing to lose, including the safety of the United States. And I'll take that argument on with anybody.
Okay. Real quickly, and we may have to do this after the commercial break too, a big blow to big labor. I know you guys are reading about this. Workers at the Volkswagen assembly plant in Tennessee rejected an effort by the United Auto Workers to unionize the factory this weekend. The head of the country's largest labor organization, the AFL-CIO, reacted to the defeat, saying in part, quote, "History will show that this narrow loss will not deter millions of workers, from T-Mobile to musicians to auto workers, who will continue to stand up against right-wing politicians and corporate opponents to chart their own future by working collectively with the union voice."
If
John?
we brought big labor leaders to sit at this table and we asked them this question, which are you more upset about? That vote in Tennessee or what Obamacare is doing to the 40-hour work week, the backbone of what labor has accomplished? Every one of them would tell you Obamacare is a bigger problem for them.
Yeah, but they don't care. All they want to do is stay. They still support Obama and the Democrats. They don't care about their workers. Let me say this about that was an outrageous statement for this reason. The facts of the matter are the German government, Prime Minister Merkel, and the top union there, which controls things, leaned on Volkswagen and the NLRB, another body that the president just made up recess appointments for, which is still before the court. Volkswagen, this was a rigged system. Volkswagen supported the vote. Everyone did. No opponents were allowed to speak in the plant, and it still went down because the American people know these things are rigged.
Yeah, and the workers at the plant said they had jobs they loved. They didn't want to put those in jeopardy. Very interesting. Some response now coming on Twitter. Sick and Tired says, well, maybe the union vote failed because they saw what unions did to the steel mills and coal mines in the Mon Valley. And also tonight, just in general, Time and Out says, Obamacare Fast and Furious, IRS, Benghazi executive orders. Don't blame Republicans. If not for the Tea Party, it would be worse. And then on Facebook, harrisfaulkner.com/harrisfaulkner. Amanda Lee Windsor writes of her own party, we are so disgusted with the Republicans, we may just stay home and not vote in the primary. The Republicans should be standing up and fighting this president, and they are not. Pat?
Well, I think that's true. And I think that it speaks, when we talked about, speaks to a larger question, the crony capitalism of that deal. But the Republicans basically have laid down people who believe, yes, Obama administration is just as bad or worse, but the Republicans will not fight them as a principled opposition.
The American dream is something you want to talk about.
Well, we have a new McClatchy poll that shows that 80% of Americans today say that achieving the American dream will be harder for their children than it was for them, which is the exact opposite of many generations who said things will be better for my children than they were for me. And under this administration, that thing has turned rapidly.
Well, that's interesting because that's actually something that a party could run on. Right, Doug? Yeah. Doug, are you there? Is that true? Am I right or wrong?
That's absolutely right. You're absolutely right, Harris. You couldn't be more correct. Bottom line, this is a rigged system.
I love it when he says
working
I'm right.
People. You're absolutely right, because the bottom line is there's no pro-growth, inclusive strategy from either side to create jobs, to educate our kids, to provide real and meaningful retirement security. Bottom line, those issues aren't talked about. You have a political class, as Pat and John compellingly have talked about, that protects their own interests, and you see people saying, at least the Tea Party is honest, workers voting against unions. Bottom line, it's a rejection of the status quo, Harris, and it's an endorsement of fundamental change.
Real quickly, Independent 02 on Twitter says, Tea Party, seriously, you're saying they're the answer? Yeah,
no,
right.
No, it is not. There is a much bigger coalition. Underlying all the cynicism and anger in this country is what really is missing is a vision for what Doug is talking about, but a resurgent America against the corruption and for the American dream and the American people. That will sweep up the country.
You literally get the last word. There's Olivia, your grandchild, did well at the Westminster Dog Show. Huckabee is next.